Hey everyone, we are heading into the holidays and the end of the year. I actually taped these episodes early, so I think this one will actually publish right after Christmas but before New Year's. And, the holidays are an interesting time for sure. I know for some of my listeners, it can be a very emotionally draining time. There were definitely times when I also felt isolated, lonely, or, in tremendous grief. But now I feel joyful. I feel a little overwhelmed because I do have two young kids, so we have to do all the things, but it's a lot of fun. We aren't very religious, but since I grew up in a Judeo-Christian household, I've kind of carried through all the holiday traditions from my childhood into the family now. So it's still all very secular celebrations, though, to each their own, right? Anyways, we have a quick long weekend trip to Manhattan scheduled. We've never done the New York scene around the holidays with the kids, so that'll be fun. I've been up there this time of year, but the kids have not. My kids do love New York. We took them for the first time last year to see all the sights because my daughter was learning about the Statue of Liberty in school and she wanted to see it in person. I was a little nervous bringing them up there. I mean, at the time they were 7 and 4 years old. And New York City requires a lot of walking, and I don't use strollers. So we do travel a lot as a family, but I've kind of avoided big cities with them just because of their age. It's hard on them to do so much walking, but they loved New York City. I mean, just sitting and eating pizza on a bench while watching pigeons kept them entertained for like a solid hour. They just love all the activity, people watching, and there is so much to look at there. I'm also that mom that plans stops at playgrounds all throughout the day just so they can just, run around and be kids. It all worked out. And I'm excited for this upcoming long weekend that we're going to take. We're going to do ice skating, the Bryant Park, Christmas market, all the things. So we're really excited. And I hope you all have some fun plans this season. And if not, truly, this too shall pass. The holidays have a way of, kind of stirring the pot. If there's an area in your life you're not feeling great about, this time of year does tend to crank up the volume on it. And I know for a lot of people, family dynamics get impossible to ignore with all the gatherings and expectations and all the pressure around that. So I wanted to use this moment, this weirdly emotional, reflective pocket of the year, to pull that lens back. As much as the holidays bring up their own stuff, they also kind of highlight what the whole year has been about. Everything I've been talking about on this podcast, the cracks, the patterns, the wake-up calls, the emotional pressure points, especially if it all feels a little louder right now during the holidays and as we close out 2025. So I thought this would make the perfect time to do what I call a full circle episode. All right. So I do hope you enjoy, and we'll get started. Welcome to the Respond podcast. I'm your host, Samantha Reigle, an intuitive and longtime mediator with over 20 years of experience helping people move through conflict, not just to resolve it, but to listen to it, because conflict is here to reveal what we've outgrown or what's no longer aligned within us, around us, and in the world that we're moving through. I want to start off by saying I am so freaking proud of myself. I really am. Launching this podcast was a big stretch for me, and not because I'm afraid of talking about conflict or the content. If anything, that part has always been pretty easy for me to do. I do a lot of public speaking for my job, and I'm pretty confident in what I know. I've spent a lot of time also sitting right in the middle of conflict, so the expertise has never been the scary part. However, what has stretched me was the vulnerability of putting myself out there and honestly, the tech that's involved. Oh my God, the tech. I am not someone who naturally gravitates towards being public. I'm not a big social media person. I don't document my life online. So the idea of showing up consistently on camera, in audio, in my own voice was a big leap for me. And there was, the tech mountain I had to climb. I didn't know how to film a podcast. I didn't know how to edit. I didn't know how to publish anything or what equipment to buy. Thank God for YouTube. I sat on YouTube for hours and taught myself. I experimented with different editing platforms, made a million mistakes, fixed them, made different mistakes, fixed those, and then eventually figured it all out. At some point, I stopped waiting to feel ready and just said, screw it. I believe in this message enough to learn in real time. And honestly, launching a podcast about conflict in a year where every system on the planet seemed to be on fire turned out to be pretty perfect timing. Because if this year has taught us anything, it's that conflict is not going anywhere, personally, relationally, or collectively. But as I say all the time, conflict is simply the energy that rises when something is no longer aligned. It's the moment the system of your eternal knowing says, this version of my life doesn't fit anymore. Conflict reveals what we've outgrown, what needs healing, what needs renegotiating, and what needs to fall away so something new can emerge. And when I talk about conflict, I'm not just talking about the loud, relational, external kind, the arguments, the miscommunications, the family tension, the workplace dynamics. I'm also talking about that internal angst that you feel inside your body, that agitation, that emotional pressure that you just don't know what it is. You can't name it. It's like restlessness, sadness, irritation, heaviness. Something might not even be happening at the moment, but you feel it. And conflict is both the chaos you can see and the discomfort that you feel inside. This is why I've always called conflict a portal, because whether it shows up as chaos around you or discomfort within you, it's still an opening. It's the moment life nudges you to look closer. So to me, conflict is very much like a womb, that strange, uncomfortable, miraculous space where something new is forming, even when you can't see it yet. A womb isn't peaceful or quiet. It stretches, it pressures, it pushes, it rearranges. It's dark and tight and unknown, but it's also the place where new life begins, right? Conflict works the same way. Whether it's internal angst or external chaos, it's still a portal. It squeezes us, stretches us, forces us to face truths that we're avoiding, and then invites us into a new version of ourselves or our relationships. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but it's also the exact place where our next chapter begins to take shape, and that can be exciting. And that's really been the heartbeat of this podcast. I launched this podcast back in June, and since then we've touched on everything: family tension, couple dynamics, gaslighting, workplace dysfunction, collective unrest, political chaos, everything happening in the world. And week after week, no matter the topic, the same pattern kept revealing itself. Whether you're dealing with your mother-in-law or watching a geopolitical crisis unfold, conflict always follows the same sequence. So today's episode in our year in review, our Take This Into the Year with You capsule episode. This is the one that you can come back to when your brain feels a little scrambled and your body is in full flight or fight and you need something simple, practical, and human to hold on to. I'm going to talk about what I call the conflict portal method. And don't let that name fool you. This isn't some rigid framework or clinical communication style you'll forget the second you get triggered. This is a 3-step method rooted in the nervous system, meaning your body already knows it. We're just naming the moves so that you can recognize them and then use them intentionally. This method is the backbone of every episode we've had all year. You'll hear it over and over again as I dug into some real world conflicts. So I want to break it down in a way that actually feels usable in real life. And I call that first step in the conflict portal method the fracture. It's the very beginning of any conflict. I don't mean the yelling or screaming, not even that passive-aggressive text or email. Nothing anyone said or did is the beginning. The conflict always begins with a feeling. A little one, a tiny one, often so small you almost brush it off. That feeling of having to grin and bear it and swallow it. The slight sting of, wait a second, that didn't feel good. The micro flinch in your body that says, oh God, that landed really weird. You will feel things are off before your mind can even process it. And it might even feel like you're annoyed, dismissed, rushed, unheard, disrespected, overwhelmed, suddenly quiet, suddenly defensive, suddenly hot, suddenly numb. It's going to be so subtle. It often shows up before you can even turn it into words. And because it's subtle, most people skip right over it. And like I said earlier, swallow it down and push it aside. But that initial moment, that internal ping, that is the fracture. The fracture is your body whispering, something's off for me, not someone is wrong, not someone needs to change, not this is a disaster, just something here doesn't feel aligned. That's it. This is the most important moment in any conflict because it sets the entire trajectory. And yet it's the moment we're least trained to listen to. We're trained to react, justify, argue, swallow it down, or explain it away. But if you can learn to notice that fracture, you can change everything downstream. It's the moment you need to put your awareness on without actually judging it. Just notice it. The fracture is phase 1 of every conflict you've ever been in, big or small. And it's also phase 1 of every global systemic conflict too. Don't worry, we're going to get into that collective version a little bit later in the episode. But for now, just remember, the fracture is the first moment you feel like something is off, and noticing it is going to be your superpower. The next step in the conflict is the portal method is the actual portal, the space between the trigger and the choice. So once you notice the fracture, the little nudge that something feels off, you arrive at the second phase, the portal. The portal is the pause, the space, the reset. And this is the part your ego absolutely hates. It will try to bulldoze right through the pause because it's in protection mode. It wants out of discomfort now, and it will push you towards whatever reaction feels most familiar. This is where your old patterns start warming up in the background. The urge to react fast, defend yourself, shut down, fix everything for everyone, spiral into a story, go silent, or blow up because your body can't hold the tension anymore. The portal is where you interrupt that pattern. It's the moment you choose not to react from the most activated part of yourself. I think it's also important to point out that not every big emotion is a sign that something is misaligned. Sometimes the emotion is an old wound flaring up or a past pattern resurfacing. So this pause gives you that space to sort it out. You need to question it. Is this my intuition or is this my history? If you've listened to my intuition episode, you'll remember this. Your intuition is quiet but very clear. It's grounded. It doesn't rush or demand urgency. It feels like a knowing rather than a panic. It comes with a loosening in the body, not a tightening. It settles you rather than spinning you out. And that's why the pause is non-negotiable. When your system finally settles, the truth that remains, the thing that still feels solid, that's your intuition. And if it is a misalignment trying to get your attention, then it will sound like, give me a minute. I need a second to think. Let me get some water. I'll be right back. Can we pause this and come back in like 10 minutes? Let me breathe for a second. And internally, you're telling yourself, I'll come back when I'm clear. This is important, guys. You're not exiting the conversation. You're exiting the activation. That feeling that's trying to push you towards your old way of reacting. Just remember, you can't communicate well when you are in flight, freeze, or flight. Your brain literally loses access to logic, empathy, nuance, perspective taking, and problem solving. Your system chooses protection over connection. That's just biology. So the portal is you cooperating with your biology instead of fighting it. Once your body calms, your clarity returns. And that brings us to the third phase of the conflict portal method, the one where we're actually wanting some kind of reaction the whole time, right? And that is what I call the rewrite. where your truth becomes action. You get to react. After the fracture, after the pause, you're going to land in the rewrite. This is the moment you speak, but you speak from alignment, right? Instead of fear. The rewrite isn't about winning. It isn't about proving your point. It isn't about fixing the other person or controlling the situation. It is about truth telling, clean truth telling. And there's a formula that works for almost everyone. Here it is. I feel blank because blank. What I need is blank. I feel, the reasoning behind it, and what you need. Here are some examples, guys. I feel rushed because we didn't plan. I need a minute. I feel hurt because I don't feel listened to. I need space to share my thoughts. I feel overwhelmed because this came out of nowhere. I need time to process it. Or I feel disrespected because I shared something important. I need it to be taken seriously. The rewrite says, this is my truth. This is the impact. This is what brings me back into alignment. You're not performing. You're not dramatizing. You're not defending yourself. You're not trying to control what the other person does next. You're simply naming what is true for you. When you move through all three phases, the fracture, the portal, the rewrite, you're going to shift the entire conflict dynamic. You stop repeating the same cycles. You stop reacting from old wounds, and you stop outsourcing your power. You allow that which is no longer serving you to fall away so the new can emerge. You're going to respond with intention. This is the conflict portal method. But now let's take it a step further, guys. Because this year on the podcast, I didn't just stop at personal conflict. I zoomed into family dynamics, romantic relationships, workplaces, communities, politics, and even global tensions. So I want to talk about how this method applies in different corners of human life, including the biggest and most overwhelming kind of conflict we face, which is like collectively that global systemic conflict. So I think I'm going to try and be as clear as possible going through this list. And let's start with kids, because they're the clearest example of the method in its most raw form. So if you have kids in your life, here's a little insight in how to understand what's happening with them when they are confronted with conflict. Kids will feel the fracture instantly. I think for adults, it's more subtle, but kids will feel that fracture instantly. They just don't have the language for it yet. So it's going to come out as yelling, tears, or that's not fair, or you're mean, or storming off dramatically. Usually with a flair only a child can deliver, right? So with them, the method is simple. The fracture, something feels off, so they will need to learn how to say, I don't like this, I need a second. I think as an adult, we can coach them through that. The portal, like I said, I think we can help the kids with this part. And that's the portal, the pause. It might look like counting to 20, taking 3 big breaths, squeezing a pillow, or saying, I'll talk when I'm calm. I remember when we were recently at a Katy Perry concert this past summer. She had brought some kids on stage and one was visibly overwhelmed. And even though she was like wanting to go on stage, as soon as she got there and looked around, it's very overwhelming. Everybody's clapping and staring at her and she started to cry. She was very upset. And Katie was so sweet with her, got down on her knees so she was eye level with this child and told her that when her daughter Daisy, who I think at the time she had said was like 4 or 5, gets overwhelmed, they blow out 4 candles. So Katie held up 4 fingers and she had the little girl blow at her 4 fingers with nice deep breaths. And it worked. The child calmed down. So I think this is a really good example of how we can coach our kids through the portal part of the conflict portal method. And then once we can get them to settle down, they can rewrite with the same formula. I feel blank because blank, I need blank. Okay? Families will transform so quickly when kids learn this, and honestly, when adults actually model it. All right, let's look at romantic relationships. In couples, conflict has its own rhythm. Most people don't keep fighting about the same topic, they keep fighting the same pattern. That's the loop. The portal interrupts. So here's how the method fits in a couple situation. The fracture is going to be like, something feels off for me right now. It's not going to be an accusation, just awareness that something feels off. The portal is going to be, I need 10 minutes, or so I don't talk from frustration. It's going to be that pause that saves hours of cleanup later. And then when you're done with the pause, the portal, the rewrite is going to be, I feel blank because of blank, I need blank. Okay? Can sound something like this. I feel unheard because we're talking over each other. I need us to slow down. So what softens relationships isn't being perfect. It's replacing defense, which is truth-telling, okay? How about in the workplace where people pretend that they're fine because they're at work and they're trying to be professional? But the workplace is actually full of fractures because professionalism has somehow become code for don't show that anything's wrong, right? Meanwhile, everyone is like losing their minds. So the language shifts to something more neutral. The fracture is going to be, I'm noticing something isn't working well here. Okay? The portal, the pause is going to be, let's step back, revisit this after we've had some time to think. And you can communicate this out loud, right? In the middle of something. You not only say it to yourself, but you can communicate it out loud to your coworkers, your boss, whatever needs to happen. This is pretty neutral language. It's not going to antagonize anyone. The rewrite is going to be, the impact is blank, what would help is blank. Okay? Workplaces thrive when people stop guessing and then start communicating clearly. Okay? For therapists, coaches, mediators, anybody who's, helping others professionally, this method is going to become part of how you guide others. The fracture is going to be something like, you can even ask, what felt off for you? Where did you feel it in your body? Okay? Then the portal you're going to communicate is going to be, let's pause, let your system settle for a while. And then when they're ready, the rewrite is going to be, the truth I'm realizing is blank. The boundary that honors that is blank. So it's all about helping people hear themselves more clearly, not just managing the situation. So I did a little bit of a breakdown of how we can apply this kind of in our personal lives, with our family and kids, within our partnerships with our partner, spouse, and then at work. Okay, but now I want to kind of shift and talk about global conflict. So on this podcast, I talk a lot about the big picture conflict, politics, polarization, collective trauma, authoritarianism, global unrest. And then here's the cool thing. I think it's cool. This mass conflict follows the same three phases, just scaled up. Okay? So for a global fracture, it's going to feel like something's off on a mass level. Listen to my Trump episodes that I just did. I talk a little bit about what happened. The first part one, I talk about what we were all feeling collectively before Trump even came into office. So this is like a really good example of that. Because before revolutions or protests or upheavals, there's always a collective fracture. People start feeling unheard, unsafe, disrespected, overlooked, controlled even, and powerless. That's the most important one, powerless. You see it in rising distrust, polarization, economic instability, identity-based group tensions, all signs that a society is saying this isn't working anymore. That's the fracture. And then the pause, the portal that societies need but rarely take. This is going to be the hardest part to watch because collective pauses are incredibly difficult. A real society pause requires time, listening, accountability, negotiation, courage, systemic repair, truth telling, and ultimately, leadership needs to be acting out of humility. Most systems resist that. They bypass the pause because it's uncomfortable and threatens the status quo. When societies don't pause, things will escalate into misinformation, propaganda, scapegoating, these us versus them narratives, violence, authoritarian responses, breakdown of trust, right? Between the people in the government and people in each other. But when societies do enter the portal even slightly, you see, that's when peace talks happen. Reform, truth commissions, coalitions will start forming, grassroots movements, actual listening to each other, right? Renegotiation of power. The portal is where a society chooses evolution instead of repetition. And then we have the third part of the conflict portal method is that global rewrite. The rewrite on a global scale sounds like, here's what's been happening, here's what needs to change, here's the structure that will honor everyone going forward. And it might even look like new laws, new leaders, new protections, new agreements, some accountability maybe, reparations, cultural shifts, and ultimately collective healing. Every civil rights movement, revolution, peace accord, they're all rewrites on a historical scale. They're a society saying that old pattern is done. This is what comes next. Global conflict isn't just destruction. It's truth rising to the surface. It's misalignment refusing to be ignored, just like in personal conflict. And you might be wondering, what does global conflict have to do with me trying not to snap at my partner? And here's why it matters. Systems evolve when individuals do, and individuals evolve when they understand their own conflict. When you learn to notice the fracture early, pause instead of react, and then speak your truth clearly, you're not just improving your life, you're interrupting the chain reaction that will fuel collective tension. You will raise kids who don't explode without warning. You will show up in relationships without repeating old wounds. And you're going to create workplaces where clarity is like normal. You're going to model accountability instead of blame. And maybe most importantly, you're going to stop adding heat to a world that is already overheated. You become the portal, the pause, the clarity, the grounded voice in a reactive world. And that's how collective conflict eventually shifts, not because systems magically change, but because people change. And when enough individuals learn how to move through conflict consciously, the pattern breaks at scale. So here we are at the end of 2025, bringing everything full circle. The conflict portal method, the simple 3-step sequence, is the thread woven through every story we've explored in families, marriages, workplaces, communities, politics, global systems, your inner world, and it all comes back to these 3 moves: the fracture, the portal, and the rewrite. I hope you know that these 3 steps aren't just tools, they're a way of orienting yourself in conflict. A way of partnering with your nervous system instead of fighting it. I hope that you have access to your clarity when everything around you starts to feel chaotic. And that's why I wanted to talk about this today. When you use this method in your real messy everyday life, you're going to feel that shift and you're going to begin to trust yourself more. You'll begin to show up differently. You begin to listen better and speak more cleanly. You'll stop abandoning yourself, abandoning your truth. So this is what conflict is trying to gift you. Not destruction, not shame, not chaos, but clarity. And that's how we create a world that responds with wisdom instead of reactivity. Thank you for being here this year, for listening, reflecting, questioning, exploring, and opening yourself to the idea that conflict is a portal. It's been an honor to walk with you through the fractures, the portals, and the rewrites of your life and the world around you. I will see you all back next week. I hope you have a wonderful New Year's. And as always, next time, don't react and respond with intention.